All right. Before I continue with the next campaign tutorial, I want to make note of a couple of things. The first one is you will notice that the content in text on my screen seems to be a little bit smaller. That is because SmiteWorks has fixed the Scale UI command that allows you to resize the overall size of the windows. So when I set up the layout of the overall DM screen, that was a Scale UI value of 100. I generally like to set my screens up with a Scale UI value of 75. And the reason for that is it allows you to really present the map on the screen. The map is really your central focal point. But if you compare my previous video where I was setting up the size of the screens with this current video, both on the player and on the DM side, you will see that there's a lot more room to actually play with. The chat box is much tighter and smaller. I've got a complete separation between the party sheet and the character sheets. The table screens are going to be shoved over a little bit, and all of the other, like my story notes, for example, if I pop that open, it's going to pop up over here. Whereas generally I want it over here, and it definitely allows me to make a little bit more use of the overall screen real estate that I have available to me, both on the player side and on the DM side. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is someone questioned how Fantasy Grounds dictated, or decided rather, that a NPC dying in here was something that the DM could carry on with. Honestly, I can't speak to that 100%. But generally what it does is, from me as a DM's perspective, I see that as, oh, okay, yes, the combat tracker is primarily set up there to affect player roles, but NPCs benefit from that because of the fact that you're throwing them into the same interface. So yes, while NPCs die the minute that they hit 0 hit points, according to the rules of D&D, as a DM in Fantasy Grounds, it gives you that level of flexibility, is what I was implying. Because, like what happened with the last encounter, the entire party wiped out the goblins. Technically, you're supposed to save one of them, or the goblins are supposed to run away in order to allow the party to capture one so that they can question him and find their way to Cragmaw hideout, which is the next destination in theory. So I just wanted to make that as a small point. Third point rather, the FR, and this will be for the DMs, the FR in the fonts page is actually not French. Someone was able to point out correctly that it was actually Forgotten Realms. So as a result, you will see that there are a few more languages in here, like Ingen and Terran. And I think there's one up here. Orin and Aquan, for example. I think those ones are coming from the Forgotten Realms language font. So I actually have both of them enabled. I don't know if you need them both enabled, but I do plan on finding out. The next thing that I have gone through and done is, you'll notice here at the bottom right, and again, this is on the DM screen only for the moment, 10, 11, and 12 are now mostly empty. I took some advice from my own tutorials and created a singular weather table. So if you look over on the left half of the DM screen, you'll see that I actually have created a custom table for myself that'll actually go through and trigger all of the rolls that I need to have happen for the weather in one table. So I don't need to go through and open up 3 tables and then go through and do that. I had planned on doing that before I had recorded that video. I just didn't get it done yet because I actually hadn't gone through and recorded the tutorial on showing people how to actually do that. Now that I've done that, even though I haven't uploaded it yet, now that I've done that, I just went through and created this. And then finally, the last point was that we ran into a problem with I think it was Fairfarn's breath weapon, in that it would not actually go through and trigger any damage. I have since fixed that, but I'm going to show you how to do that and set the correct stats at the same time. So I'm actually going to do this on the player screen so that screen's just not idle for this whole time. So scroll down to the breath weapon here. And what you want to do is you want to expand the details of the breath weapon itself by clicking that little magnifying glass, and then click again on this particular magnifying glass here. And what that does is that pops up this customization table, if you will, or customization screen. But I have to make sure that the stat is correct. So I need, oops, I don't want that, I want the race. So I got to go back to the race tables and dig out Dragonborn. And what I am looking for is, this is a bronze Dragonborn. I do believe I said it at that. Was it bronze or copper? It'll tell me in a moment. So fire, gold, fire. So I made him a reddish. Did I put that in the range? No, I didn't. Dope. I actually didn't put that in there. I have actually forgotten. I'll probably have to go back and watch it. But it's either a copper or brass. So we'll go with brass for now. The damage type is fire. The breath weapon may not be a constitution-based attack. Unless they've gotten rid of that. Breath weapon, dex, 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 dex. Okay, so yeah, see here? This tells me that it is a dexterity save. So a green one, for example, poison, that would make sense that it is a constitution save. Silver and white here, that is cold, cold, that does make sense that it would be a constitution save. But fire is definitely a dexterity save, so I need to make sure that I make that adjustment. So all you do is you click through these until you get, oops, I just went right by it, until you get to dexterity. And then you click through this until you get to dexterity. Now this one's going to have a lot more in the way of options that are going to pop up here. So I want dexterity. Now, what I'm going to do is just temporarily add a NPC on the DM screen to the combat tracker. Yep, there we go. NPCs, that means you were the lower one. Alright, I'm just going to throw in Arokra here. I'm not sure entirely how to pronounce that. Make it possible that the player can actually see. Now, if I've done this correctly, I should simply be able to drag this die over on top of that and it will attack that. So, on the DM screen, he succeeded, which means in theory he should only take half damage. So if I drag the effect onto him, that is correct. So if you look on the DM screen, he's taken 6 points of damage. No, he has taken 3. He has taken 3 out of the total 6. So everything is now working when it comes to the breath weapon. So that is how you go through and fix that. So that is the last of the homework on getting everything fixed up. And finally, the last little thing is I'm going to try to make these episodes a little bit shorter. That way the player isn't necessarily seeing a whole lot of nothing for a whole long period of time. Because generally, unless the player screen is actually, or the player themselves are actually doing anything, their screen's mostly idle. I do need to share this out though. So there we go. That just took a moment. And I'm going to shrink this and move all of the character detail screens over a little bit more so that I can get myself a little bit more in the way of real estate for the map. Because the map is going to be key when it comes to moving around. And unless you have a larger party, you can actually just shove that pretty close to the top there and give you room for the combat tracker down here by the dice. Okay, so this is actually a closer layout to the way that I like to have my, oops, I didn't want to grab that, I wanted to grab this, to the way I like to have my player screen laid out and organized. Alright, and did I lock this one? Yes, I did. Okay. So, with that in mind, the party managed to get to Phandalin a little bit damaged, but otherwise able to get there with one piece. So, when they actually go through and enter Phandalin, and I'm going to pop open a little pin here, bring over the story element, do a quick pass through just to make sure that everything associated with Phandalin shows up in this little spot here, so I don't have to worry about doing it again. And that there's quite a few points here. So okay, I think I went quite a ways past. All right, so let's open that back up. That should pop that open. I need, now if I'm not mistaken, here is the map. And that is something new. You can literally just click on that map. This is the handout. So this is pretty much the DM screen here. Whereas I believe, yeah, there we go. This is the player screen. And, oh, there actually is one other thing that I wanted to make a correction on. I'm going to do this on the player side because the DM screen, it goes really wonky because of how wide I've got this particular screen. So I did mention that in the Classic Edition, the map could be made as part of the background. That is still possible to do by clicking that little arrow at the top. And you can do it again so that it gets rid of all of the items on the border. And you can still zoom in, you can still use the middle mouse button to move it around, but now you can lay things on top of it and not have to worry about whether it's going to clutter anything. And if you want to get access to any of the other assets, you just simply go back and do that. And that's literally it. So the same thing can happen on the DM screen as well, but I find that it can be a bit problematic due to the layout. Now, I may look at an alternative layout now that that functionality is there, because when I created this layout, that function didn't exist. But I just wanted to point out that it does in fact exist in the Unity edition. So that's something I wanted to also correct on. I knew there was one thing I was forgetting on the notes, so I'm going to close that because I can easily get back to that very quickly. Well, it's always a bit... You'll note that the actually getting access to the part of the window to pull it out doesn't really line up with where you would expect it to. But anyway, I digress. All right, so once again, I'm going to load up the party tokens. So letter tokens, medium, P. That's where the party is going to come in. So the party comes into Phandalin, and right here there's a brief town description that you as the DM can go through and read. I will let you pause the video here and read it if you wish. But generally, these are the key features of Phandalin, specifically from an NPC perspective, that you're going to want to deal with. And I believe, so he comes in later. One of these guys is the one you have to drop things off at. Alright, so here is your primary page for Phandalin. This is generally where you get everything linked from anyway. So you want to go to Barthen's Provisions, is where the party wants to go first. That's where they are supposed to drop off the supplies. Barthen's Provisions is right here. And so if you don't see that and where my mouse is moving, that little pin that I'm surrounding is where Barthen's Provisions is. So when the party enters Phandalin, you can post this text that they can then read. And the reason why you want to post that there is, again, for the campaign ledger, if you will. And this is generally what you get before they have gone through and potentially rescued Sildar, if they've been able to do so. But in this case, the party went straight to Phandalin to deliver the supplies that they were deemed in charge of deploying delivering and making sure that they got there safe before they went back to deal with Cragmont Castle or any of the other features of the map. So the party comes into Phandalin, and they see the rutted track emerges from a wooded hillside. You catch your first glimpse of Phandalin. The town consists of 40 to 50 simple log buildings, some built on old fieldstone foundations, more old ruins, crumbling stone walls covered by ivy and briars surrounding the newer houses and shops, showing how this must have been a much larger town in centuries past. Most of the newer buildings are set on the sides of the cart track, which widens into a muddy main street of sorts as it climbs towards a ruined manor house on the hillside of the east side of town. As you approach, you see children playing on the town green, townsfolk tending to the chores or running errands and at shops. Many of the people look up as you approach, but all return to their day-to-day business as you go by. And let's see, I've already rolled the weather, so It is normal for the season, light rain or snowfall. We'll make it rain and a light wind. So I would add as a DM on top of that, despite the light breeze and the light drizzle that is currently hitting each of your heads, the track is still passable. It has not yet gotten muddy, dried out, had time to dry out over the last few days of rains, and you're not entirely certain whether those rains even made it to this particular part of Faerun. And you see smoke coming out of a lot of the log buildings. It's a cooler day out of this time of year, so it's normal for the season, which means it's cooler. You're in early spring still. The sun is shining. The wind is coming from the south, and it's carrying a little bit of warmth with it, but not enough to get rid of the chill. And things like that. And so you'd go through and you would add that information to it. Now, the party hasn't yet seen this because I haven't shared it over. Duh. I generally forget as a DM, and then usually one of my players goes, can I see a map? So, players, by the way, can control the pog and the token that are on the screen. So, I'm going to ask the player to move where they think Barthen's, or down towards the central part of town there. So, the party themselves is on the lookout for Barthen's provisions. They know that's where they have to deliver the cart, and very quickly they realize that the red roof building at the top of the larger manor there, or on the north side of the larger manor, is where Barthen's provisions actually is. So they park out front and begin to let's say that let's see, who is our most charismatic of the lot. So that will be Clever. Clever decides to get off the cart. She decided to ride for some reason, and make their way into Barthen's provisions. Now, Barthen's provisions, and I'm not sure why that didn't stick over here. Maybe I went through too fast. And as a DM, you can see how very quickly it is to actually go through and pop something open. Alright, so as a DM, right away, if you look at the details for Barthen's provisions here, you can actually see that there are some limitations here. So this is a supply store. It does carry the bulk of the supplies that players would and adventurers would generally purchase for a particular event, so i.e. rations, things like that. But the limitation is that it won't carry anything that costs more than 25 gold, which I believe is going to primarily be most of your... I still don't have my GM. Maybe I do. Okay. Most of the... let's just go back here and turn classes on for a moment. Things like martial weapons and stuff like that. So I'm just going to pop this briefly open, go to the fighter, because that's a good example. Yeah, there we go. Player's handbook. Pop the fighter open. I'll bring this over to the right monitor here. Go down to the weapons table, and specifically the adventuring gear table. Things like that. So what the guide is referring to is anything in this column, like for example, they might carry a crossbow, but they will definitely not be carrying a great sword or a great axe, that kind of thing. And on the adventuring side, or adventuring gear table, looks like you can buy arcane focuses here. Looks like you can buy pretty much anything that's here. A climber's kit could be on the no-go. Diplomat's thing could be is definitely not on the no-go. Neither would be an entertainer's pack or a scholar's pack, but other things do appear to be there. So rations is a perfect example of something that one of our characters does need. So if I look for that, it only costs 5 silver per. If you're not sure of the scale cost, inside of the player's handbook is the reference manual, as per usual. I'll bring this over here. Oops. Again, because I'm recording with 2 screens, things are a little bit laggy, so I tend to be a little bit quicker than what it is that my system can keep up with right now. And I believe it's under wealth. Yes. So under the wealth category, so if you look for coin, under wealth, you'll see this here. And essentially this is that it takes 10 silver pieces to make up 1 gold piece. 2 electrum pieces, it takes 1 gold piece, obviously, to make up 1 gold piece, and it takes 10 gold pieces to make up 1 platinum piece. So that is how you can read this scale. And in case you didn't know, 100 copper pieces is essentially equivalent to 1 gold piece. So to be honest, you could look at a gold piece being the equivalent of a US or Canadian dollar. I'm not sure what other currencies exist that would have that ratio, because 100 pennies made up $1. 10 cent pieces made up $1. You don't really get 50-cent pieces anymore, so that could apply to, I think it was a 50 pence, I think it was, for a pound, that kind of thing. So two pence to, or 2 50-cent pence to a pound. Cent pence, yeah, that's not really it. Anyway, you know what I mean. $1 to $1, and then platinum piece was equivalent to, I think, $10, yeah, in this case. That's if you have a little bit of a problem. That's how I initially rationalized how to map it out. All right, so for example, for 1 gold, they can buy 2 rations. And seeing as one of our players is a little low on rations, they may want to go through and do that. And who is that? That is, and you'll have to excuse that popping sound. That is actually my chair. And anytime I turn or shift, it goes through and pops. All right, rations. Why are you down to 1? Right. So Clever is the one that needs to go in and buy rations. Okay. So, with that in mind, she wanders into into Barthen's supplies, or provisions rather, and she sees a gentleman sitting behind the bar, or sitting behind the counter. That's the word I'm looking for. And some characters have an image here so that you can show them to them and then therefore describe them to them. Others, they just have a description. And I just wanted to make sure that from a DM perspective you saw that. So what she sees is a lean, balding human male, roughly about 50 years, with what looks to be a friendly face on him. Hasn't talked to him yet to know whether he has a kindly manner or not. There are a couple of young clerks who, again, they don't know their names yet, so you can't read them out, who help load and unload wagons, stuff like that. So Clever wanders in and calls out to the patron of the store and essentially says, "We have a delivery from Neverwinter." I have no idea why a girlish voice sounds like a male voice in this case. I can't really do women voices, so I apologize to anyone in the crowd. You must be from Gundren, are you? Aye, that be us. Right, okay. Where'd the names go? Ander, Thistle, please go unload the cart. Alright, so that'll be a 10 gold pieces, will it? I think it was the agreed rate. There are 4 of us, sir. Oh, okay, I see. Are they out by the cart still? Yes, they are. Alright, so that would be a total of 40 gold pieces for your quest reward. And at that point, as a DM, you could successfully state that they managed to actually go through and deliver. So the parcel is already set up. I will drop that on the map. This is the delivery pay. It has already been preset for a party of 4. If, however, as a DM, you have gone through and got 5, 6, 7, 8 players, whatever, and the agreed upon price still stands, you can make a modification by clicking on that little lock symbol there, add the difference. So it could be, let's say in the case of 8, you would add an additional 40 gold pieces to that, and then you could lock it again. And that way you can't accidentally change it. The problem is that if the Lost Mines of Phandelver module ever goes through the process of being updated and has to be reset, that change goes away. So you got to be made aware of that. That's one thing that you got to be made aware of. And that happens by going into the modules, I do believe. As soon as this loads, remember I got a few modules. Let's see, if I do mine, oops, if I could spell it, Lost Mine, I should find it. There. Apparently I'm typing faster than my system can keep up. Yes. So, if you right click on a module that you are actively running through, you'll see that there is this option here. That is revert changes. So let's say you bought a newer module that Smiteworks had just put out because it was just released from Wizards of the Coast, and it took a little bit for Spiteworks to get it up and ready for Fantasy Grounds, and then they finally release it, but there's some additional subsequent changes that come down the pipe because maybe they missed something or something didn't parse correctly with whatever it is that they used to do it. You can apply those updates and changes to your environment by reverting to the updated module. So Fantasy Grounds, by the way that it works, won't automatically apply those changes. You have to do this manually. And it does that intentionally so that you as a DM don't unintentionally lose things. You have to intentionally lose things. That's a good way to put it. In the event of actually going through and reverting changes to a thing. Now, what reverting changes means is that if you had gone through the process of adding the additional 40 gold pieces here, that would be undone. If you had gone through and customized the description of one of the story entries, because you can do that, you just unlock it. They're not read-only. They're only read-only when they're locked. Then those changes would become undone. So that's why I, as a DM, don't generally do that. I will create a new story entry and then add that either to my own categorized entry in the story tree or leave it uncategorized. And it should theoretically leave it alone. But in this case, I've only got 4 members in this particular party. And as a result, I'm going to go to the inventory sheet here, drag this, and literally I'm just going to drop it. I'm holding it down right now with my left mouse button. I'm going to let go, and that's going to drop the 40 gold onto that particular party sheet. But that's not all. There's also a quest completion reward. And this one you should go through and adjust. And the rules for the reward are as follows. They might be on the previous entries. That's all that we farm. Generally, it comes through with... All right, so they go to there. They go to there. That is the parcel. That's if you brought Sildar there, so he gives you an additional stipend there. Barthen's provisions. Okay, so at this point, the characters don't know of this particular segment of that because they haven't gone through and done any research. But all they know is that Gundren isn't here, and that's kind of concerning. So that's something that Clever would make note of if she was paying attention. Or you could potentially make her roll a perception/wisdom check on something like that. Okay, now I'm going to pop open the character inventory sheets on the player side and then scroll down to where it's gold. So right now she has 15 gold pieces. I'm going to reward this particular amount of gold out, and all I have to do is drop that. Down at the bottom, you will see in the chat window that it has divided out, and that information is equally displayed on both the player side and on the DM side. And the reason for that is so that there is an accountability. They're both going to see the same piece of information when it comes to something like that. The player total here is now 80 gold pieces, and what we should see on Clever's side is that she now has 25 gold pieces, which she does. So we know everything worked there. Okay. Now, Clever, knowing that she is going to be short on rations and that the rest of the party wants to go and return to deal with Cragmaw, not castle, hideout, and she's going to need to be able to get there, which means she needs to be able to survive. She does not have the ability to forage or do any form of hunting or anything like that. So with that in mind, she's going to negotiate a price with the DM, or in this case, the patron of this particular supply market, so Barthen's Provisions. So she's going to open up. You wouldn't happen to have any supplies laying around, would you? Barthen might reply with, I have a few. You looking for food stocks, rations, what? And this is how the story can progress between you, the DM, and the players. They can add that introduction, and there's a level of communication there that goes back and forth. Yeah, I need a few rations. You got 10 days worth hanging around? Yeah, I do have that. All right. So now what you do is you deduct 5 gold, because it's going to cost 5 gold. You can get 2 rations per 1 gold. Divide that by 2 gives you, or multiply that by, divide 10 by 2, multiply by 5 gives you, sorry, by 1 gives you 5 rations. So the adjustment here goes into there, and she now has 11. Come on. Really? You're going to make me... Inventory? I wonder if this is another issue of updates. On the client side. Yeah, apparently you can do a local rest. Alright, so for some reason, rations are not updating. So I'm going to do this. And this is, oops. This is the long way to do something. Wow, something seems to have happened over the last little. Just as an FYI, this is a pre-release of Fantasy Grounds, so there may still be some issues. Okay, so there we go. So if you do run into a problem, just close out your window, and that should update there. Yeah, so we're good. That may have been how the issue with the rations came into play with the last screen. But anyway, if I close and reopen, there's 1 day ration. So, all right. So if you run into an issue where you can't enter in text for now, just close it and reopen it. Maybe hopefully they'll get that issue resolved. I'll make note of it and send it off as a report to them. Although I have to go through and try to recreate it multiple times. But anyway, all right. So Clever takes the rations from Elmar and starts to put them into her pack. And let's see, she's going to roll at that point a wisdom check. Or perception check, rather. So passive perception is 11. Not that great. But if I do skills, perception, she is proficient in perception. There goes resetting the screen again. Alright. She does look around. Where be Gundren? And Elmar goes, he hasn't arrived yet. Oh, that seems a little strange. He left a few days before we did. He should already be here. Huh, that does seem to be concerning. Well, we're going to be taking a look at another location here. We got attacked by goblins on the way here. Maybe he suffered the same consequences. All right, I will mention that to the party, and we'll go see if there's anything we can do there. Yeah, please let us know if you do find him. That is highly concerning. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems here. So now I've just created the hook, or rather, Clever has created the hook to allow the party to go take a look at Cragmaw Castle, or Cragmaw Hideout, rather. I keep wanting to say castle. Anyway, all right, so she goes back out. She informs the rest of the party as to the fact that Gundren isn't here and hands out the rest of the gold. Is she going to be honest enough? Let's make that a 50. Now, something I didn't show you is that there is a percentile die here. So if I take that, and all I did was right-click to get the radial menu up, I have now selected the percentile die with the left mouse button, and I'm not touching any buttons at all. In fact, I don't even have my hands on the mouse. As long as you don't touch anything, that cursor will hold on to the mouse, and this is in the player screen. Now all I do is I let go while I hold down the left mouse button, let it go, and throw it in there. She's honest enough. So she rolled a 16. Yeah, she divvies out the gold evenly, so that's all done and ready to go. Now, with that in mind, I have now set up the hook for Cragmaw Hideout. The players are going to decide to leave Phandlin. They've now gone through and supplied up, although the rest of the players, let's say they go through and buy a handful of rations each, just so that they have enough on hand. You already have 6 days, so he's going to add another 10, so that'll bring it up to 16. And he needs to reduce down to 15 here. Now, Clever did not pick up any of her arrows, but she still has a few, so she's not overly worried. Grow is going to also buy a few rations. He's at 15, so let's make that 15. Or sorry, he had 10. Sorry, he had 5 and I added 10. Apparently I can't type, think, and talk at the same time. I don't know why, it just doesn't seem to function that well. 16 and 15. Alright, so this party is set up for the equivalent number of days to be able to, or a good number of days to be able to go through and run out. So they start to make their way back. It's still early in the morning. And then they eventually leave Phandlin. And I'm just going to drop this, or delete this token from here. Reopen the map, which is here for Sword Coast. And as you can see, the P didn't disappear from here. When you grab a token from the token screen, and again, this is going to be on the DM screen, unless that token is directly applied to a creature, NPC, beast, or player, or trap, it will remain on the map. But if you link the players, let's say I had them enabled on the Phandalin map, and then when we got to Cragmaw Hideout over here, I moved the players onto that. They would disappear from the Phandalin map. And the reason for that, and I think it's just how Fantasy Grounds works with it, is to map it over. It eliminates the content, or eliminates the tokens rather, excuse me, on the original map and moves them over to the secondary map. Oh my, excuse me, I seem to have gotten a frog in my throat. I hope that doesn't happen every video. Anyway, so in the case of when we get to Cragmaw Hideout, I didn't have any of the player tokens placed anywhere, so they'll just simply get dropped into place and they won't disappear from anywhere else, except maybe the order screen. And I'm kind of hoping that that doesn't happen, because that is an irritant, to be honest. I would prefer that anything that is on this order screen remains on the order screen, so that you can just drag and drop them on the map in the same order. Otherwise, you get a if it takes 3 weeks for the party to go through Cragmaw Hideout, just due to time constraints or whatever, you might forget what the original order is on the actual marching formation, and then not place them the exact same way, or forget to put them back. Leave them there. That's all I ask. Leave them there. Anyway, another one of my gripes, and I'll probably mention that a few more times. Alright, so the party heads out of Phandalin. Let's say they only got 2 squares back because of where they originally were and whatnot. And they go through and do a bit of a rest. Let's see, they were mostly in town, so we'll go back to here. So where did my encounter... Oh, right, I keep forgetting. There we go. Let's see if they get a night encounter. They do not. So they get a nice quiet rest in the various orders. 1, 2, 3. Now, if I know that a player a player party is going to get to a story element that could theoretically have a series of fighting in it, I won't throw an encounter at the party when they're this low level. One, it interrupts the flow of getting the party there. You don't want players to always be on the world map. You want them to be in whatever map that they're dealing with for encounters or for role-playing and whatnot. Traveling from place to place, you can add a bit of a role-playing effect to it, but it generally is not something that... it's there for transition. It's not really there for a huge role-playing aspect of it. It's part of the story, essentially what it comes down to. So that is episode 2 for the campaign series, and we will see you in the next episode.